Welcome to Data Myths Podcast with your hosts, Brian and Malinda Gagnon. Today's episode, we're going to talk about all things augmented reality. We're going to go way past Pokémon Go, and we might even go to Fire Island. But I know one thing, we're going to dive in. So you ready? Let's go. Good morning, Malinda.
Good morning.
How are you today? I know I got you some coffee, so you should be waking up.
Yes, yeah, it's starting to seep in, so it's good.
Nice.
I think I'm ready.
We made it to podcast 4, so woohoo! We're also on the Apple, iStore or whatever the heck it's called.
Yeah.
So that's exciting.
Absolutely. Yeah, people are listening, which is is cool.
Yeah, and giving us reviews. So
Yeah.
if you're listening to this, please feel free to give us a review. So let's dive in. The topic of this today really came from our friend John, who posted a really insightful thing on LinkedIn. And what it was a picture of someone doing augmented reality with a new pair of shoes and being able to, sort of look down, put the new pair of shoes, the product on his feet, and be able to kind of take a screenshot and make it look like he had these brand new pair of shoes. And that got me thinking, that's really interesting. How does this fit into things like social and, kind of the show me what you've got society that we live in today, where, people are putting all their cool stuff on Instagram to kind of have status, wealth, and treasure, out there for all to see. And I got thinking, let's talk about AR, right?
Yeah. There's interesting elements to this. I mean, around how it's driving commerce, entertainment, and this social element as well that you mentioned. So, in terms of talking through AR and what that means, how about we first just talk about like what is AR, VR, all of those wonderful acronyms.
Yeah, so we won't assume that everybody listening, I guess, has all that, right? So my definition is virtual reality is a completely separate world created that we can get inside of, whether it be climbing into the box, at the fair that puts the pictures up on the wall, the sounds and the motions. And then there's some type of, contrived environment or, the goggles that go over your eyes and take us through, very game-like experience. And then augmented reality is taking the world that we live in now and applying data, information, video overlay, things like that to that scenario, which is augmented, right?
Yeah. And I think a great example of augmented reality that a lot of people are familiar with is the yellow line on the football field. So we're all getting ready to watch the Super Bowl tomorrow. We know it well, but that's the down line. So that is a digital overlay on the real world.
So the hockey puck, like when they decided that was a bad idea or good idea, and the little, comet followed the hockey puck and NHL. I think that was one of the first failed examples that I've seen, because they did away with that pretty quickly.
Right. Yeah, you need to make sure you're not annoying people with this little comet or whatever is flying around.
Yeah. So take us through a little bit of the history, of AR and VR. I mean, I think they've been around for a long time, and maybe we haven't even realized it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this whole idea of putting digital information on top of the real world is really pretty basic. I mean, that's not something that's really new. And when we think also about how that has evolved, virtual reality, as you were mentioning, is that most immersive experience. Augmented reality could be really kind of the lowest touch or immersive experience, if you want to think of it that way. And then you also have mixed reality experiences. So that's when you're actually bringing digital and real worlds together and you get to actually interact with or manipulate your digital object in the physical world. So a great example of that is if you're shopping for furniture, maybe you're on your phone, you see a chair that you really love, you can drag that object into your room and resize it, spin it around, change the positioning so you can actually see it in your room.
Is this I feel like I want this technology right now because I don't want to have to move stuff around in our living room anymore for the manyth time,
Or our office.
or our office.
Our
Yeah.
team can attest to this.
Yeah.
Sometimes we need to reconfigure, air quotes, our office. And let me tell you, when that happens, we get like good mojo going. It's good to switch things up.
Yeah.
Keeps the mind fresh.
Well, I will be purchasing this technology if it can help us not move heavy stuff around.
Yeah.
So-
That's a workout that's maybe not always super fun.
Yeah, and so let's talk a little bit more about sort of the history of where this started to surface, right? And so I was reading some, and this really got me thinking, and I like to go deep, to the roots, right? And so one of the things that I found was AR has actually been about since about 1959, from the research that I've done, where a cinematographer basically wanted to take and make video a much more immersive experience. So he overlaid smells and sounds and video and motion into this little photo booth, and that was kind of the first place that this surfaced, which is really interesting. So 62 years later, now we're at this point where it's starting to become, real in our everyday lives, which is interesting.
Yeah, and I think if we think about our recent history with these technologies and experiences, it's really been in the last like 5 years or so, and particularly with entertainment, marketing, advertising. I mean, of course, Snapchat. I mean, are the lenses that have captivated hearts and minds and wasted a lot of time. Oh, I shouldn't say waste. No, I actually do enjoy Snapchat. Another interesting marketing example a few years back, so this wine label, 19 Crimes. So they had an AR label, so you scan the label.
I'm gonna stop you. Like that is actually 20 crimes in my mind, because we messed around for so long trying to make that AR work before we opened the wine, and that was disappointing to me.
Well, so the AR experience worked. However, what you had to do to get to it was ridiculous. So, downloading the app. Then once I had the app downloaded, I had to download the brand for the experience that I had. So this wine app had multiple wine brands.
I mean,
So-
this would have been fine if we started this process when we started thawing out the bird for Thanksgiving, and then had the plan to like have the wine on the table by the time the bird was done.
Well, and I bought this wine to actually try this label at Thanksgiving, thinking it would, be a fun thing, like family sitting around, kind of conversation piece, whatever.
Oh, it was a conversation piece.
Yeah.
When is she going to open that wine?
Exactly. Well, but I never would have had the patience to actually go through with all the downloading and waiting around. Like the moment would have long passed. Like, who cares? Let's just drink the wine. And let me tell you, the wine like needed the marketing gimmick because it really wasn't the greatest. But the AR experience was cool. It was fun. It was
So-
entertaining.
I'm going to give 19 Crimes an F- for user experience. Like maybe if they, had a pour top on it so that we could kind of drink as we went, it would have smoothed things out. But
Well, I mean, you can open the bottle before you're playing around with the label.
I would
mean,
highly
is-
recommend that.
is-
But that's not the greatest user experience.
But and that's the whole thing with how are we going to actually use this to communicate, to sell, to market? these experiences have to be available in a way that's easy and convenient. I mean, no one's going to work that hard, for one of these experiences. I mean, they will, but think about how much better it would be if you could actually just, scan something on your phone and actually just load an experience. So that just needs to be there.
Well, and a little bit on the historical, right? The first commercial application that I, was able to uncover on this was actually Boeing, right? And Boeing built AR so that they could take a 3D part. And because it was really expensive to render and model, they were actually using a robot to kind of rotate that part and then sort of overlay that into a space. So that's really kind of the first commercial application that I could find. That was still 1990 or 1991, if I recall. And that's interesting. But from that point forward, now we're back into games and getting it prolific. And, I think you've said to me a few times, hey, let's get a VR headset, right? But we still haven't done it yet.
Right.
And,
Only because I get addicted to video games and it shouldn't be in our home. So but that's a personal thing.
that's a
Yeah.
podcast for another
Yeah,
time.
exactly. So and this idea of particularly VR gaming is certainly very interesting. And we've seen sales really drop off. So what do you
What?
think is behind that?
Yeah, it's interesting. So if you look at the market, there's two things, right? So because VR is sort of in its own system, so to speak, it's its own universe, there's a lot more sensors involved. There's a lot more um, just creation of that world, right? So cost, right? That's a much higher cost to do that. And specialized equipment today, specialized room, maybe a specialized chair. The key word is specialized. And when you say specialized, that usually comes with dollar signs. So, you know, they're estimating that the market is going to be about 70 million in the next couple years. But I looked on Amazon this morning, it's fallen off a cliff. People it looks like they've just stopped buying this stuff, which is really interesting.
Well, it's the hype, right? Maybe the hype is waned a little bit. There's nothing really new coming out, and just the excitement has waned.
My take is that there are 3 billion plus phones in the world, and a phone makes a pretty good augmented reality device. It has good enough sensors and sensor fusion. It's got, processing power to do some light, augmented reality, and it just has made it easy, right? It's made the user experience easy.
And there it is. Yeah. And especially with being tethered, right? I think more we see gaming devices, particularly VR devices that are wireless, that's going to be huge too. I mean, granted, that's not going to help the cost part of the equation, but yeah, how much fun is it to be, tethered as you're trying to look around, move around, all of that. So,
Yeah, well, and let's talk a little bit about the tech, right? So there's been Blippar. I think you did stuff early with Blippar. I don't think they exist anymore. Pokemon Go kind of came in like flash and fury, and that died off as quick as I think it came in. Why are some of these technologies cycling in and cycling out? Is it because their platform just never hit that, that platform status, so to speak?
yeah, I mean, in terms of Pokemon Go, I mean, yeah, that was a serious serious phenomenon. And, these type of um of games that have augmented reality plus this location type of aspect is really interesting. Talk about, mashing up the digital and physical worlds.
And I think as I think about this, right, I just think, Snapchat filters are just pervasive everywhere now. I think everybody looks airbrushed. Everybody has little hearts and things, giraffes and whatever else popping up, and, you know, a voice generator and all of that. But where does that go? Where does that become actually commercialized? Because I think when we start to see this stuff commercialized, I think that's when some of the problems that I think we're going to talk about here in a little bit come into play. Like, what are your thoughts on
Yeah.
that?
Oh, and I should mention, Blippar is still around.
Oh,
So
they are.
yeah,
Okay, sorry, we didn't
yeah.
mean to kill you guys.
No. We don't want to do that.
Just kidding.
Yeah. Um,
Yeah. So I mean, what are your thoughts on where this is going to get commercialized? And
yeah, I think we're gonna keep seeing these type of interactive experiences. So people want to be entertained, and of course, video is huge. Well, video is huge because it's engaging. And think about digital elements, video elements. How can we have an interactive and engaging experience? The key is it just has to have all those qualities. It's easy to access. There's no latency with the experience. So no, it's wide open and it's exciting to see.
so here's a big question: does augmented reality kill the shopping mall that we know today?
I think shopping malls are going to struggle. So if they don't bring in some of that digital experience in store. So, we've seen things like, Walmart, for example, like they've patented a virtual reality technology that will allow people to simulate in store. Now, we've also seen advancements in in-store experiences. So if we think about like smart mirrors, right, that help people select clothing to see what's in stock, we have to get more like cross-pollination between the in-store worlds and the digital worlds and make sure it's not just like a one-way street.
Interesting. I didn't really think about it that way. So, do you think that there's a place for the store, the traditional bricks and mortar store today, to still integrate with these technologies from a commercial standpoint? Or do you think people are just going to go and look at the thing they want to buy, use the virtual mirror app, and call it a day?
Yeah, I mean, I think it has to be both ways. I mean, Amazon, for example, I think it was last summer. So they actually had VR kiosks in shopping malls to promote Prime Day. So, again, that's an example of bringing the digital world into the store and really supporting, both experiences because we all know this, you can't separate those experiences. So we have to just think overall when it comes to retail, how do I engage my customer? How do I make sure I'm delivering to them product that they love? Inform them about the product, right? Whether they're different styles, different colors, functionality, whatever that may be, and simply just think about the best way to do that. So if you're in store, take advantage of all the things in store. They can touch the product, they can try it on, they can feel it, all of that. But they're missing, for example, the selection. They're missing the how-to video or, whatever else, maybe all the reviews. Well, put it there for them, right?
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I think about it, me personally, right? And I'm interested to your thoughts on this of maybe the more global picture, but I get to a price point or something depending on how it's going to be in my life, something that is, has tactile feel to it, has like emotional connection, like a couch, for instance. I'm probably not going to use AR to I might use it because I don't want to move the couch 15 times. Um, but I might take the color of the couch, I might take the size of the couch, and I might sort of see how it looks potentially in the living room. And I'm sure you're going to be happy. like when we bought the TV or bought a TV the last time, and I made the cutouts on graph paper so that you could kind of see how big the TV looked like. Um, I look at it as that's great, but I still want to sit in the darn thing and put my feet up and see how it like emotionally feels to me. That's just me.
Let's talk about a couch buying experience, because I shopping for a couch has been one of the most annoying things that I've had to do in a little while. So,
Which means that it's the most annoying thing that I've had to deal with
well,
in a little while too.
so yeah, I mean, it's, you know, it can be a fun thing, but let's face it, when you don't want to spend a lot of time doing it, it gets really annoying. So, what if there was actually a good connection between offline and online when it came to shopping? And IKEA, apologies if this is you, we don't have a IKEA store near where we live, so maybe this is it. But what I would love is to be able to, you know, filter by style, by length, then being able to actually put it in your room, right? With via that, mixed reality experience we're talking about, and then be able to say, okay, I want to see these 5 couches when I come into your showroom because I'm going to make my selection then, right? That is the best shopping experience. And
For you.
for most, correct, but for anybody who wants to actually, not have to waste time by walking into a showroom and sifting through all these criteria. I am always frustrated when I'm in a store, just like, man, I just wish I had a filter right now.
Yeah.
But
I do
that's
too.
just
My filters may be a little different, but no, this is great, and I think we could talk about in-store purchase versus out-of-store purchase and mixed purchase, right, all day long, and I think that's interesting, and we should talk more about that. But let's shift gears a little bit. So now I just want to sort of pose, something to think about that we can discuss. So now we are on Instagram. We are taking the selfie and we're laying over a filter, that makes it look like we're in the Caribbean, or it makes it look like we're somewhere that we're not. So seems pretty benign, but the technology is starting to get there where you could make yourself look like you're somewhere where you're not, or wearing something that you're not, or have something that you don't own. I'm starting to see some potential legal ramifications potentially in my mind, right? And secondly, from an ethics standpoint, I think there's a lot to talk about here.
well, it when you peel it back, it's really about when we're talking about the cachet of a photo, right? How it can be trusted, what it's worth. That has been, I mean, to say eroded, I think is understatement. It's been decimated, meaning digital photography can be altered to the point that you're right. I mean, it's not real, and we don't know with how, digital forensics, which, yes, if you've never heard of it, it's a real thing of like figuring out if a photo has actually been altered or not.
Well, let me
But we can't figure it out, so we don't know what to trust. So that's one thing.
ask you. I want to actually go through a series of kind of yes or no's. Can we edit a picture today?
Yes.
Can we edit audio today?
Yes.
And we can make that sound like somebody else's audio.
Yes.
We can edit location.
Yes.
We can edit things in the picture. And I'm sorry, if you could all see the stairs, they're real.
So yeah, and so when we layer all of this, we can have something that started as real, a real photo, a real voice, and we can alter it to the point that it is absolutely no longer true. So Now, where does this leave us with marketing, advertising? And I'll go there, journalism, right? We have an interesting time to decide as consumers and as consumers of items, of product, but also consumers of information, to know what to trust and what not to. So this whole, you know, system of influencers and social media, we really have to be suspect of, what we see, and at this point what we hear may not be true. So not only do we have this
No,
really,
that's
I
a
know, right? I
shocker.
know, it's incredible, right? Mind blowing. So we know about video edit or image editing. I mean, Facetune and obviously Photoshop's been around for forever. It's just getting easier and easier for people to alter photos and then put your augmented reality stuff on top. There's also voice cloning now. So with basically 5 minutes of audio, a system can actually clone your voice to sound just like you or just like whomever.
This is why I've started, like, whenever I get those calls I don't recognize anymore. I used to say hello and, and then it would go dark, but I'm suspect that they are just capturing my voice print. So what I've started to do is I just, answer in an Australian accent now,
Yeah.
g'day.
Yeah.
And it really throws them off, I think.
That's good. So you'll just have the Australian Brian
Yeah.
cloned out there. But
My grill turned into a Barbie. It's all good.
yeah, I mean, and so when we think about like what we have trusted, I mean, we know images, but now it's voice too. Any kind of, voice recognition is really out the window as a security measure now.
Well, and on that point, right? So Michael Crichton wrote a book. I believe it was called Rising Sun, and it was seen in Japan. If you watch the movie, it's got Wesley Snipes in it. Terrible actor, but that's okay. Send hate mail later. But it was all about this, right? Where he got framed in Japan for doing these acts, and they doctored, the video, and it was all digitized, and it looked completely real, and almost got him in a world of hurt. So, the fear and the thought of this has been out for a while. How does this play out, right?
Yeah. And in the last year, so Baidu has something called Deep Voice, and they've been able for quite a while to clone voices. And really the advancement there was that they just needed far less input to be able to do it. So they can have just 10 samples, less than 5 seconds a piece, and they can basically create a synthetic voice that fools like 95% of voice recognition software.
Wow, that is kind of frightening, actually.
Yeah, I know. Technology is cool and scary sometimes.
Well, and I know we've talked about it in the past. Hey Google, Google Assistant, and what is it, Duplex? Really interesting, right? When they came and put that on stage, and it was AI that could essentially speak to you like a human, and it sounded very authentic, and it asked questions. It called up, and they used it to place an order. I think a Chinese restaurant as the example, and they asked questions, and the human at the other end, had answers, and in some cases they maybe weren't clear and legible, and the AI was able to sort through it, and they thought they were talking to a real human. That's an
Yeah.
ethical challenge.
Well, and imagine if I say, "Oh, I want my Google Assistant to make the phone calls in my voice." So people really do think it's me. And yes, absolutely, it's an ethical question. Is it unethical to not disclose to someone that it's actually a robot talking?
So we're living in augmented reality now in 2019, whether it be voice, whether it be video, whether it be photo, or whether it be any of the other senses at this point, it seems.
Right. And when we think about these blended worlds, right? So digital, physical, real, unreal. Our definition of unreal is very blurry. I think most of us would agree that the Google Assistant making that reservation is real. They're doing something that's real. They're making sense. They have information. They're creating action in the world.
Yeah.
So, what are those rules that we play by, right? And I'm not saying like actually codified rules, but like the social rules, right? That we all like feel good about. Like, yeah, that's how we interact together, and this feels right.
And so now let's talk about it in a couple different facets, right? So with Pokemon Go, for instance, Pokemon Go obviously turned our whole entire world into a big video game. And there were people running around everywhere, taking pictures, next to people's houses or going into a bar and taking pictures and doing all this crazy stuff. And then people started, a few people actually caused accidents. I think a few people actually died. I don't have the stats on that, but I'm sure you could look it up. You know, this stuff starts to get dangerous a little bit if people lose their heads and, start to think, hey, life is just a big video game where you can overlay, you know, the next episode here. How do we think about this?
I mean, it's really fun. I mean, let's just put it that way. I mean, it's cool to be able to interact with our world and with each other in this really different way. And when we think about that as well, it's that like remembering that there's a lot going on in this quote unquote game that isn't in control of the game. And I think that's where, it gets a little interesting.
Well, and if you think about it, right, what is the human capacity to be able to handle all of this data? Because it really comes down to data. And when you start overlaying stuff, it's one thing looking for the couch. It's one thing putting pairs of shoes on my feet with my phone and, looking how they would, how cool I would look with that. It's another when we start getting this stuff out into the world and it's augmenting, our reality. How does this, how does it play out? I don't know if the human brain can take in all of these senses. It's a lot.
And I would actually love to talk to a psychologist and a neuroscientist about that because, yeah, I think there would be some really fascinating connections around like what we can parse out, when you're actually like thinking of it, think about it this way. You're in real time, you're on the street, you're all into, your Pokemon Go game. And are you really stopping yourself to say, oh, wait a second, maybe I should stop. Maybe I should, these kind of immersive experiences. Yeah, maybe they don't allow us to process in a way that we would think is rational.
Well, and what about the letdown experience too, right? Which is we start now living in a world where we could take pictures with anything, we can take pictures doing anything, and so can other people. One-upsmanship all of a sudden, I guess, that could potentially go away.
Maybe. Well, in this whole, let's talk about the one-upsmanship thing here, like just the Instagram phenomenon, right? Of looking fancy and promoting your own highlight reel, being larger than life, which, that's cool, whatever your thing is. That is getting a lot easier to do. So I saw an article a couple weeks ago about this company in Russia that has a private jet out on the runway and they never fly it. They just use it for photo shoots.
Hey, I saw that jet. Isn't that it's parked at LaGuardia?
Well, this was in Russia.
I think it says Trump on the side. No, that's not his jet.
Oh man. So, but yeah, people pay to just get on the jet and, in their posh outfits and just have a photo shoot so they can have a picture of themselves in a private jet. And I mean, again, whatever floats your boat. Like, I'm not here to whatever. But
So augmented reality. Is it augmented reality? Fire Island, the Fyre Festival. Was that augmented?
no,
What is that?
no, that was quite frankly great marketing and no friggin' festival. So no, that's pretty straightforward. Now,
Dude, where's my beer?
that brought up a lot of questions about how influencers are used in marketing, which I would love to get into. But let me just finish
Okay.
this whole thing about just the general public and you know looking sharp on Instagram. So okay, this person is renting out the plane. They're selling that. They're selling their photos. Well, you don't need a plane anymore. Just have your backdrop of the jet, have your, augmented
Green
reality.
screen.
Exactly. So, you know, and at the beginning of the episode today, you were talking about trying on shoes. Well, I can take a photo of myself potentially in this next great new designer dress and not actually have it on my body. I'm virtually trying it on. And, how
So no more
slick do I
no
look?
more tucking in the tags and bringing it
You
back the
know?
next day after the party.
Yeah. So, and then this is a whole nother thing with Rent a Runway, right? I mean, those are actually real clothes that you're renting, which I think is a little tangential, but um, it's this whole relationship of first of all having unreal images, right? And our attraction to having more and more unreal images, whether it's through scenes that aren't real or images of ourselves that aren't real, like with Facetune. Like you can basically give yourself plastic surgery, with this app. Um, so as a cultural phenomenon, this is very interesting. And people are actually getting plastic surgery so they can look like their Facetune pictures.
What?
Yeah. Oh yeah. So it's just wild. Like how the unreal is affecting the real.
Well, so as I'm thinking about this right now, does this lower the barrier of the have and the have not?
Oh.
Because you can overlay anything. I could put myself in a Bugatti and take the picture and look like I've got a Bugatti. Does it start to lower that barrier? I can make it look like you've got a Coach bag.
There are no barriers that are lowered. It's just the proliferation of showing off what's not real. And I mean, again, it's fine. Like if people want to consume a fantasy world, that is fine.
Well,
Right. However, just know when it's a fantasy world and know when it's not. And please, dear people, do not look at a bunch of Facetune images and retouched photos of celebrities and try to make yourself like that and feel badly about yourself because you're not like that.
well,
It is a fantasy.
let me. I'm going to Fire Island with this somehow or the
Oh
other.
yeah, no,
Yeah.
and I want to go there. I just really wanted to talk about this
I don't.
strange and interesting world of photo alteration
I
and
don't actually want to go there.
bragging on Instagram.
Yeah. Well, so if you think about that, right? Do we actually get back to, and not to be too heady about this, but it is early in the morning. Do we actually get back to the physical world because everybody in the digital world has the capability now, whether it be Instagram, Facebook, wherever you sort of show show your emoji, show uh, your persona. Does that all go away because anybody can look like they're on the hut in Tahiti at the end of the dock taking the picture and have the bikini bod
Yeah.
body tuned on, so to speak, and your makeup looks great because you used Facetune, and it happens to be a beautiful sunny day because that got photoshopped in. um,
Right.
does that go away? And
Well, I
the
think
differentiator then becomes, if you're actually physically seen doing that, we're back to the physical world again, which is kind of neat in a way.
so. Well, I think part of the point that you're getting at is if more and more people have the ability to make something fake, people will realize like, oh, what I'm seeing is fake. So the pressure is off, right? But for people to trust something is real, what is that going to take now? Is it like it brings a whole nother element to, eyewitness reporting that do you actually have to see it like in real life? Your physical presence have to see something to believe it, or see something from a trusted source, meaning a journalistic like outlet for you to actually believe something. And that may be what we're coming to.
That's frighteningly interesting, I
Well, I
guess.
mean, but think about it like, social media, citizen journalism, when anything can be doctored and you don't know who you can trust, it kind of like goes back to the whole like, no, I need my editorial desk to be like, okay, this is vetted. I know where this was taken, and I also know that this person's going to lose their job if they tell something that's false, right? I
Right.
mean,
Yeah, and obviously there are some outlets that slip through the cracks on
of
this and
course.
haven't been fully vetted, and we the sheeple, will follow many things, but you know, let's and it's interesting how we've kind of gone from augmented reality to influencers.
Mhm.
I do think that there's a lot to talk about there, right? So,
Sure.
let's talk a little bit
Fyre
about
Festival.
Fire. I want to talk about Fire
Yes.
Festival. So that was
We watched it the other night, the
captivating.
documentary. We watched the Netflix version. So I didn't watch the Hulu version. So, you know, maybe another time we can comment on that whole, debate on how that went down. But in terms of just the stuff that brought up, I mean, the marketing was genius. And I'm saying that because,
From like an actual execution.
yeah, I mean, the visuals were beautiful. It was captivating. Were they informative? Pretty much. But in terms of just getting this buzz and this intrigue, I mean, it's like awesome. The whole idea of this, you know, fire tile. I mean, it's like, you know, a gradiated color tile image, that went viral but it was all because of influencers. And basically the influencers didn't do a good job for the most part. I think one of them did. I think it
Emily
was,
Emily Ratajkowski
yeah.
was the only one that put either promotion or
Mhm.
ads. So I'm thinking they're all getting subpoenaed now. She probably has nothing to worry about, but if you're Kylie Jenner or whoever else that sent this out to 100 million of their followers, do they have liability? I don't know.
Well, and so if you're an influencer, you are required to disclose that you're involved in promoting, right? That you're not just at your own free will promoting something or making a suggestion. And that's to ensure that ads aren't misleading, you know.
So was this is an interesting thought and question. Was Fire Island or the Fire Festival, was that augmented reality or was it virtual reality? Because it sounds a lot like it was virtual reality where they kind of created a world that just didn't exist.
Oh yeah, that for sure. I mean, the intention obviously was to make it exist. And that's just a classic, you know, big fall on your face on the execution part,
So the game froze up.
Yeah, big time. Big time.
So
Um that's like management 101. Like have an amazing marketing team and your visionary folks, but then, have the tried and true people who just know logistics and know how to make it happen. So yeah, which they clearly didn't have, or they brought them in like 8 weeks beforehand.
yeah. And so my thought on that is they're in a bunch of hot water now. Billy, what's his name? He's
McFarland. Mhm.
McFarland. He's in jail. It sounds like they're
Oops.
going after, Jerry's studio now, and we'll see how that turns
Jerry
out.
Media.
Jerry Media.
Hmm.
Yep. Uh, and so some of this, right, is going to come down to liability. And, people obviously are going after the money. So they're going after bigger names. does it really come down to saying, hey, this is augmented reality, you know? And where I'm going with that is, do we get to a place in society where we have to start announcing, because the law says we do, that, hi, I'm Google Assistant, um, you know, augmented reality or AI, and I'm calling to place an order for Brian, you know, no matter how realistic it sounds. Does that announcement have to take place? Does the picture that gets altered, have to get some type of disclaimer on it? I don't know.
Yeah, it depends on what we think we owe each other, I think. In terms of these digital assistants making phone calls, I personally think there should be some kind of announcement. I mean, just to be polite, if I have someone on speakerphone and there's other people in the room that can overhear the conversation, I just feel like it's the right thing to do to be like, hey, I have you on speakerphone. Oh, Brian's here too. You're not so the person just knows, like, oh, you're not just talking to me right now. I feel
Well,
like the same courtesy is there if you're talking to a robot. Like, they should know.
but where do we find that line, right? Because that's maybe what you're comfortable with. I've talked to many other people that I get well into the conversation, and then the next thing you know, somebody else chimes in, and I'm like, oh, so I've been on speakerphone the whole time.
Yeah, and you don't feel great about that, right? Because they're not disclosing what's happening on their end.
I don't. I mean, but then
Just
like,
like on a conference call. I mean, obviously, people are like well into the conversation and be like, oh, hey, and interrupt the whole thing. But there should be a reasonable effort so everybody knows who's on a phone call.
but now, and so then when we take the editing of photos and overlay of photos and all of that, where is that boundary, right, between freedom of expression and and actually changing something that could be purported as false? That's, I think society is going to have to spend some time thinking about these things, right? And it's the porridge is too hot, the porridge is too cold kind of problem. And
Right.
I think right now nobody's even testing the porridge. So,
Well, it's caused, I mean, these questions have caused a lot of problems. I mean, there was a Marine um, in Afghanistan who wrote welcome Marines on a cardboard piece of cardboard, posed for a photo with some Afghani kids, sent it home. That photo ended up making making the rounds in social media, and what was written on the sign was changed many times over, to some quotes that were just awful to Afghanis, other quotes that were awful toward Marines, and the guy ended up getting court-martialed because they thought that he was, basically, doing something that was against the code, and they had to go through this whole process of figuring out, well, what was actually written on the sign.
interesting. Well, and that brings up a whole new part, right? So now with augmented reality, you take Google, like let's say Street View, for instance, which that was a hot button for a lot of folks. Now you can take augmented reality, be driving down the street potentially, and looking at your phone, the augmented reality device, and now you're seeing advertising on our house. I don't want advertising on, or maybe if there is advertising on my house, I want to make sure I'm getting the money for that, not somebody else. There's really no precedent for this today.
Right. Do you own the image of your home?
Yeah.
You certainly don't own the image of your home from the sky, which I have a big problem with. But that's for a whole nother
Wow.
a whole nother thing with satellite imagery. But and there's also, when you think of that, like an ad on your house. So, do I have the right as a person who owns my home and my property to not have people like slowing down or being distracted when they're driving by my home or looking longer at my home? Like, is that just something I have a right to? And it's similar to the Pokemon Go thing, right? What if I have a Pokemon Go location by my house? Do I have any say in that I don't want, a bunch of people all of a sudden coming to my neighborhood, right? Because somebody just decided to put it there.
What about if somebody writes something horrible and overlays it on your car? Digital graffiti, right?
Mm-hmm.
And how do you get rid of that? Today, I don't know the answer to that. And
Right.
it's totally possible. It's
Mhm.
completely possible.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of things that we have to really think about and consider. And I'm sure, 6 months from now, a year from now, when we're on our 100th podcast or whatever, we're going to be talking about this again as this emerges. But, let's wrap this up. I mean, I think this was really kind of an interesting debate and conversation. I definitely want to dive into this more. It opens up a lot of thoughts. What's your closing thought on this?
Well, this whole question of what's real, what's not real, and just the fact that I think we have to face it that our digital world is very real, and we just need to be real honest with ourselves, like on a personal level, on how we want to deal with that and how we want to draw our own boundaries around it, because we don't want to let other people do it for us.
Yeah, no, I agree. I'm going to take up more hobbies like wood carving and things like that others can only replicate.
Bird watching,
Bird
but
watching,
real birds.
but real birds, not
Yeah.
fake ones.
Yeah.
So anyhow,
Not hearing bird calls that were voice cloned.
nice. Well, we're coming up on the top of the hour, so let's close this out. Malinda, thank you for getting up early and talking through this and putting time in. And
Thank you for making the coffee.
no problem. I think I hit it out of the park this time. Only this time, though. Thank you, Infonomic Data, for sponsoring this podcast. And everybody tune in next week. We're also on the Apple Store now, so please go out there and like and review this. Your feedback is great. Send us message. Hit up datamyths.com and check us out on all the different social media platforms. Have a great week, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks, everyone.